Hey guys, tonight we begin in the corner of a cottage, one without glass windows, where the walls sweat straw and the ceiling sighs with smoke. A space you're not just born into, but very possibly conceived in. The floor is hard-packed earth stamped flat by generations of calloused feet. And you've just arrived wrinkled, squalling, and already a minor inconvenience to a household juggling pigs, prayer, and porridge. Welcome to your new life as a medieval peasant. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as always, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're born in a one-room house, if you can call it that. It's more of a hut, really timbered walls, packed with daub straw, stuffed between the beams, like someone tried to plug a drafty sock with oatmeal. The smell is immersive. Smoke from the central hearth rises sluggishly, pooling under the thatched roof with nowhere to go. There's no chimney. Those are for churches and castles. You cough within minutes of emerging from the womb. Congratulations, your lungs are officially medieval. Your mother, exhausted but expected to get back to chores by tomorrow, lies on a straw pallet. There's no midwife unless you live in a rare village with a wise woman. In that case, she's currently wiping her hands on her apron and muttering something about which saint's day it is. There's no birth certificate, of course, only the whisper of your name repeated until it sticks. If you're lucky, someone will remember to tell the priest so it can be written in the parish ledger. If not, you'll just be that second John from the Cartwright's cottage. And don't expect to be an only child for long. Medieval families, especially peasant ones, are big, not out of sentimentality, but necessity. Infant mortality is sky high. For every child who learns to toddle around the hearth, another quietly fades out of memory before the first tooth appears. Still, no one fusses over you. There's work to be done. You spend your first hours wrapped in whatever rags were closest, often an old wool tunic or flaxen scrap rubbed soft with age and dirt. Linen diapers. Try wool bindings loosely fastened and cleaned with cold water when the weather allows, which is not often. Sometimes, babies are left in cradles near the hearth, soot darkening their cheeks, while chickens scratch about beneath them. Your lullaby is the clunk of firewood, the slosh of pails, and the occasional yelp when someone stubs a toe on the chamber pot. And yet, for all its grime and discomfort, this world has its odd tenderness. Your older siblings or neighboring children. If yours haven't survived, poke your nose and offer you crusts to suck on. The family dog curls near your cradle at night, more for warmth than affection. But the result is the same. You grow up surrounded, even if not doted on. There's no privacy. None. The moment you can lift your head, you're watching your parents and siblings go about their business, dressing, cooking, snoring, and occasionally arguing over whose turn it is to fetch water. The communal rhythm of peasant life drums into you from day one. Individual identity. Not a priority. You are one twig in a tightly bundled thatch. And about that thatch, it's alive. Fleas, lice, and sometimes even birds find shelter in your family's roof. You don't find this alarming. You're too young to know any different. Later in life, you'll blame itching on the weather or bad air, but now it's just part of the background. Outside, the village goes on without noticing your arrival. No balloons, no cakes, no hand-painted signs declaring, "It's a boy," or "Welcome Agnes." Instead, the only real ceremony will be your baptism. And even that depends on how far the church is and whether your parents can borrow a mule. Until then, you're a fragile creature in a fragile world. No medicine, no maternity, leave just hope and hasty prayers whispered over your cradle. You might be wondering about maternal care. Well, it's minimal by modern standards. Mothers breastfeed if they can. If they can't, a neighbor might step in, or you're fed goat's milk with a linen-wrapped spoon. Either way, survival is not guaranteed. Infants are especially vulnerable during winters when food is scarce and fires are low. Sometimes you're swaddled and hung from a beam like a bag of onions to keep warm and out of the way. Practicality often replaces sentiment, and yet you're loved in a rough, unceremonious way. Your mother sings to you in snatches, half songs she barely remembers from her own childhood. Your father calloused hands and all might scoop you up and bounce you once or twice before setting you down with a grunt. There's no time for prolonged cuddles. The cow won't milk itself. But the affection is there folded between tasks, like an old handkerchief carried for years. As days pass, your eyes adjust to the gloom of the house, and you begin to distinguish shapes: the iron cauldron over the fire, the loom in the corner, the crude wooden bench worn smooth from centuries of use. Every object around you tells a story of labor, patched, repurposed, inherited. And you're the latest heir to this cycle of modest repetition. You don't have toys in the traditional sense. Maybe a carved stick, a knotted bit of wool, or a wooden spoon when no one's cooking. But your imagination will make do. Everything is a toy when you're not yet walking, and the world is made of texture and smell. The smoky air, the rough blanket, the musky scent of the family pig curled by the wall. All of it becomes familiar, even comforting. Historians still argue whether medieval infants were emotionally neglected or simply toughened by necessity. Some think parents avoided bonding too deeply wary of heartbreak. Others argue there was love, just not the kind that gets embroidered on samplers. What's certain is that your infancy will be brief and utilitarian. By the time you're 2, people start expecting you to pull your weight, fetching eggs, watching siblings, or at least staying out of the fire pit. But for now, you're safe. Warm enough, fed enough, and surrounded by the low murmur of peasant life. Somewhere outside, a cock crows. A distant shout signals the start of the day's labor. And inside, you stir slightly unaware that this cramped little house will define the boundaries of your world for years to come. You're not even a week old when someone dunks your head in ice-cold holy water. Welcome to baptism medieval style. The parish priest, who smells faintly of wine and damp wool, mutters the sacred Latin words while your mother grips you tightly. You scream naturally, but no one minds. Crying proves you're alive, always a welcome sign in a world where newborns often aren't. Your name is chosen in a hurry. It has to be a saint's name, of course. Something respectable like John or Agnes Or maybe a more ambitious choice, Bartholomew, perhaps if your parents are feeling bold. There's not much creativity involved. Most villages rely on a short rotation of saints, so you'll grow up alongside 3 or 4 other kids, sharing your name distinguished only by nicknames. Big John, Red John, or eventually, that John with the limp. After baptism, you're officially part of the church. This is less about belief, because frankly, you're still figuring out your fingers, and more about inclusion. You now count in the village ledger. You can receive blessings, and if things go terribly wrong, say the cow kicks your head, you won't be stuck in limbo. Everyone's relieved. You may still be a tiny, squishy liability, but now you're a soul with paperwork. That said, you return home with no fanfare. There's no feast, no cake, and definitely no gifts. If you're lucky, a neighbor might spare a clove of garlic or a tiny bell as a token. But mostly, it's back to the same smoke-filled room, the same animal smells, and the same endless cycle of feeding, burping, and wondering if your swaddle is too tight or too loose. Medieval infants are swaddled with a zeal that borders on aggressive. You're wrapped like a mummified sausage legs, straight arms pinned, face barely peeking out. This people believe will ensure your limbs grow straight and strong. Of course, it also makes you about as mobile as a turnip. But who cares? You're not going anywhere, and it makes it easier to hang you from a rafter in a sling when chores need doing. The church's grip extends far beyond baptism. Your parents light candles to the Virgin on your behalf. Your mother may sew a crude cross into your swaddling cloth, or tuck a splinter of holy wood under your cradle for protection. Evil spirits, it seems, are everywhere, and particularly fond of newborns. One sneeze might be blamed on a passing demon, a rash. Clearly, a sign you were smiled at by someone with envy in their heart, but you blissfully unaware continue to eat, sleep, and squirm. Your routine is dictated by hunger, darkness, and the sound of goats knocking over buckets. You don't have a separate room, let alone a crib. At best, there's a small wooden cradle near the fire. At worst, you sleep on a blanket, stuffed with straw, swaddled tightly enough to stay warm, but loosely enough that mice don't mistake you for bread. Siblings, if you have any, don't make your life easier. Toddlers have a knack for poking, petting, and occasionally sitting on you when no one's watching. Older brothers might toss clumps of hay onto your face to see if you're awake. Sisters are more likely to shove a spoon in your mouth with something vaguely edible on it, boiled oats, crushed garlic, or maybe the heel of a loaf softened with broth. Despite the hazards, you survive the first few weeks, and that alone is no small feat. Historians estimate that infant mortality could reach as high as 30% in some medieval villages. If your eyes are still open by your first full moon, the odds are improving. Your parents are proud, though they don't say it aloud. Pride is best saved for harvests and saints' days. But your mother checks on you constantly, even when her hands are busy kneading bread or mending woolen stockings. Your father makes a point of grumbling about how loud you cry, which is in its own gruff way a compliment. Now and then someone from the manor or church stops by, maybe a reeve or a traveling friar. If they glance at you, your mother straightens your swaddle and offers a tight-lipped smile. Even a baby must look respectable. If you soil yourself mid-visit well, there's always the excuse that the little ones don't know any better, which is ironic considering that you're expected to start learning your place in the household sooner rather than later. By the time you're crawling, you're not so much nurtured as managed. Mothers often sling babies across their back or hip while grinding grain spinning yarn or hanging laundry. If you cry too much, you might be handed to a grandmother, if there is one, or passed off to a slightly older child who promptly forgets you in a sunny corner while they chase a chicken. Injuries are common. So are infections, that cut on your toe. No one notices until it starts to smell. Still, you're not entirely neglected. Medieval parenting looks harsh by modern standards, but it's deeply pragmatic. Time and resources are precious. Parents show love in actions, feeding you before the dog, swaddling you a little tighter when the wind howls, and whispering a rushed prayer over you when a neighbor's baby falls ill. There's no sentimentality, but there is fierce, if quiet, care. Toys are rare. You might get a carved spindle, a lump of dough to shape, or a string with beads. Some wealthier villages might boast a rag doll or wooden animal passed down from child to child. But mostly, you play with the world itself. Mud straw, small stones, a beetle if you're lucky. Everything becomes a toy when imagination is all you've got. As months pass, your face grows rounder, your voice louder. You start to laugh at silly faces, flinch at loud noises, and reach for shiny things like the iron ladle hanging by the hearth, or the fire's red-orange flicker. These interests pose a constant hazard. Burns are common. So are bumps from falling off benches. But each scrape is a sign you're growing, that you're stubborn, that maybe, just maybe, you'll make it past your first birthday. Historians still debate the depth of parental attachment in these early years. Some believe mothers distance themselves from infants to soften the pain of inevitable loss. Others suggest a more nuanced view, that parents loved fiercely but differently, investing hope cautiously, cradling their children with one eye always on the wheel of fate. Whatever the truth, you are now part of the household rhythm. Your crying no longer draws wide eyes. Your tiny hiccups are just another sound layered atop the creak of beams, the cluck of hens, and the bubbling of cabbage stew. You are no longer a guest in this world. You belong here among the soot, the saints, and the smell of last night's ash. Your first steps happen somewhere between the firewood pile and a sleeping dog. No fanfare, no baby book entry. Just a brief moment when you wobble forward and don't immediately fall on your nose. Someone might chuckle. Someone else might mutter. Finally, but mostly, life just continues. The floor beneath your feet is dirt hard-packed cool in the morning and sprinkled with ash straw and the occasional bit of something unmentionable. It's not just a walking surface. It's a living canvas of medieval life. Your family's meals, spills, coughs, and sometimes chickens all leave their trace. Over time, the soil hardens with grime and memory. You'll grow up knowing its every bump. And as you learn to walk, you also learn to dodge. A chamber pot might be sloshing underfoot. A chicken might dart between your legs. Geese are surprisingly territorial and will hiss like tiny dragons if you step too close. Your mother swats at them with a stick, but they always come back. You develop an early instinct for stepping lightly and changing course mid-wobble. Outside the village is a small sprawl of crooked homes and muddy paths. You're not allowed far, but sometimes you escape just past the threshold. Someone shouts. You turn back, or don't, and tumble face first into a puddle. A dog licks your ear. Someone hauls you inside. There's no scolding. Everyone knows toddlers are part explorer, part barnacle. Your clothes are hand-me-downs, a tunic too long and sleeves rolled 3 times. Shoes, maybe in winter if there's leather to spare. Otherwise, you go barefoot. You learn early how to avoid sharp rocks and recognize which stinging plants aren't worth stepping on, even for a pretty flower. Your vocabulary grows with your legs. You learn the names of everything useful and nothing abstract. Pot, cow, fire, bread. You say hot long before you understand love. Words are tools, and you're already expected to wield them effectively, especially when yelling that someone stole your crust of bread or that a goat just bit you. Around you, life continues at full volume. The cottage hums with sound, coughing, spinning wheels, the crack of wood splitting, and always that low bubbling pot on the hearth. It smells like cabbage and onions most days, or beans if you're lucky. Meat is rare, and when it appears, everyone stares like it might vanish if not watched. You're still on mostly soft foods, mashed roots, porridge, and whatever bread the older kids don't eat first. You eat with your hands. Spoons are precious. Bowls even more so. Meals are communal, and if you hesitate, you'll go hungry. Your fingers learn to move fast. You figure out how to pick peas from a pile and hide them in your tunic sleeve if you're saving them for later. No one teaches you this. It's just part of growing up peasant. As you gain confidence, you're tasked with small responsibilities. Feed the chickens, chase off crows, carry water in a wooden pail that weighs almost as much as you. Most of it goes spilling down your tunic, but it doesn't matter. You're helping, sort of. And helping means you're part of the family economy now. Peasant children are not babied. There's too much work and too few hands. You don't get timeouts or therapy. If you cry too long, someone tells you to hush. If you fall and bleed, your mother spits on a rag and wipes it away. Still got both legs, she says, half joking, half checking. Despite the rough handling, you're not unloved. Affection comes in practical gestures. A warmed blanket, a saved crust, a finger tapped gently on your forehead when you fall asleep near the hearth. There are few hugs, but many moments of protection. A sibling blocks the sun from your eyes. Your father lifts you out of the mud without a word. You begin to understand the rules of your world. The fire is dangerous. Bread is precious. The Lord owns the land. The priest knows everything. And saints watch you even when no one else does. Especially then. This last part terrifies you more than it comforts. You're told not to pick up frogs. Not because they're slimy, but because they might be witches. You avoid stepping on beetles, especially the shiny black ones, because someone once said they whispered to the devil. Historians still argue whether medieval villagers really believed such things or just enjoyed scaring toddlers. Either way, you do not touch the beetles. Entertainment is what you make of it. You chase shadows on the wall. You poke the cat with a stick until it hisses. You learn that if you spin fast enough, the whole world tilts, and sometimes, if you're lucky, someone joins in. Children don't get toys. They get time space and the occasional stick that looks vaguely like a sword. The village itself is small, just a handful of families, all of whom know your name, your parents' debts, and what you were caught chewing on last week. Gossip is the local sport, and you're not exempt. If you fall into a dung heap, the entire village knows by sundown. Every day looks a lot like the last. Sunrise, chores meals, more chores sleep. The seasons change things slightly. In spring, you're allowed to gather herbs and stomp puddles. In summer, you help shoo flies from the bread. In winter, you stay indoors, more curled beside the fire, your breath fogging in the cold morning air. You're not schooled, not yet. Literacy is for priests and nobility. But you learn things. How to tell time by the sun. How to recognize the village bell's tone. How to avoid old widow Agnes when she's in one of her moods. You know which fences are weak enough to climb and which gardens grow the tastiest turnips. Knowledge here is local and deeply practical. Historians still debate the degree to which peasant children understood the world beyond their village. Some suggest total ignorance. Others believe oral storytelling and church teachings gave even the youngest a grasp of saints, kings, and heavenly hierarchies. What's certain is that your world feels complete even if it only stretches to the far hedgerow. You fall asleep each night to the same sounds: the crackle of fire, the murmur of voices, and the occasional distant howl of something wild. You sleep beside your siblings, wrapped in whatever blankets are driest. If someone snores, you nudge them. If someone wets the bed, you all scoot closer to the wall. And tomorrow, it starts again. You'll toddle out into the morning mist, chase a goose trip over a stone, and laugh at the echo of your own name. Your feet are tougher. Your balance is better. You're still young. But now you're walking, watching, and inching closer to the endless mud-caked duties of peasant life. By now, you've got teeth, at least a few. They aren't white, and they definitely aren't straight, but they're good enough to chew through your daily diet. Bread, more bread, and whatever's been boiled beyond recognition in the communal pot. Welcome to the culinary landscape of your medieval childhood, where food is functional, flavor is coincidental, and anything crunchy probably isn't supposed to be. Breakfast comes early, before the cock crows twice. It's dark, you're groggy, and your mother hands you what looks like a brick, but is actually a slice of rye bread from the week before. It's hard, a little fuzzy on one edge, and distinctly beetle-flavored. You gnaw at it anyway. It's not that you like it, it's that this is what there is. On good days, the bread's fresh. That means it's only been sitting for a day or two and still retains some softness, like damp wood instead of stone. On bad days, someone has to slice off the moldy parts before handing it over. No one calls this wasteful. It's survival. Mold is scraped. Bugs are flicked, and you eat what's left. It's all part of being God's humble peasant. And bread isn't a side dish, it's the main event. It might be accompanied by thin broth or boiled vegetables if the family's lucky, but often it's just bread and ale. Yes, ale. Even for children. It's weak, barely alcoholic, but safer than the local water, which is only slightly less deadly than drinking straight from the pig trough. You sip from a communal cup, squinting through the steam rising from the hearth. If your village has a mill, you're better off. Flour might be coarser or finer depending on the millstones, and how many pebbles sneak through. If there's no mill nearby, the grain is ground by hand, often by your mother or older sister, whose arms are slowly turning into sinewy ropes from decades of stone grinding. Lunch, such as it is, comes after morning chores. It's usually more bread this time, with a smear of animal fat or a slice of dried onion. Occasionally, there's pottage, a thick stew made from whatever's available. It could be lentils, peas, leeks, garlic, or the odd piece of salted pork that somehow survived last winter. The taste is earthy. If it's brown warm and doesn't move, it's probably edible. You eat out of a shared bowl. There's no your plate or my portion. You lean in, dip your fingers or a wooden spoon, and grab what you can. Faster hands get more. Slower hands get leftovers. There's no concept of seconds, just degrees of hunger. And the insects, oh yes. Beetles, weevils, and the occasional worm are uninvited but frequent guests. Bread is stored in baskets or hung near the hearth, but that doesn't stop pests. You get used to flicking them off. Sometimes they're small enough you don't even notice. Protein, some might say. Others just chew faster and try not to think about it. Even on feast days, those rare respites scattered through the year, the food isn't extravagant. You might get meat, but usually only after it's been boiled to stringiness. On saints' days, maybe a custard made with milk and eggs if the hens are cooperating. Sweetness, if it appears, comes from honey. Sugar is for nobles and dreams. Dessert, not a concept. If you're still hungry, you nibble another crust. Or, if it's summer, steal a wild berry or two from the hedgerow while no one's watching. You don't eat for pleasure. You eat to not fall over. Food preservation is basic. Salting, drying, or storing in earthen jars are common. There's no refrigeration, so everything smells a little off by modern standards. You learn to trust your nose and your stomach's stubbornness. The line between aged and rotten is thin and constantly shifting. Still, your body adapts. You become hardy like the village dogs. Your stomach learns to accept strange textures. Your teeth, though already beginning to rot, power through crust after crust, and you rarely complain. Not because you're brave, but because everyone else is eating the same thing. Misery shared is somehow easier to swallow. Historians still argue whether peasant diets were dangerously deficient or just monotonously adequate. Some records suggest rural folk got more fiber and fewer processed fats than modern eaters. Others emphasize the seasonal scarcities and risk of starvation. What's clear is this: you're never far from hunger. Not starving, always nibbling. Dinner is the warmest meal of the day, not in temperature, but in atmosphere. It's dark outside. Candles flicker, or rushlights glow. The family gathers. There's a sense of closeness as everyone dips bread into the same pot, shares gossip, and frowns at whoever spilled the last of the ale. There are no forks. Your spoon is communal, or if you're fancy, carved from bone. Elbows are tolerated on the table. Laughter, too, when someone drops an onion and the dog gets there first. And through it all, you learn not just to eat, but to understand food's deeper meanings. Bread is not just sustenance, it's symbol. and sacrifice. Give us this day our daily bread is a prayer with real stakes. Without that loaf, your family goes hungry. You grow up reverent of it, careful with crumbs, and grateful even for beetle-infested slices. By bedtime, your stomach is rarely full, but it's not empty either. You curl near the hearth, still tasting the garlic from supper, the smoke in the air, and the salt lingering on your fingers. Tomorrow's meals will be the same, but that's a kind of comfort too. Predictability, after all, is the closest thing to luxury you'll ever know. By the time you're 5 years old, you're officially no longer just a child. You're small, yes, sometimes sickly, sometimes snot-nosed, but idle never again. Welcome to your first real job professional, crow scarer, apprentice dung gatherer, and part-time kindling collector. It's glamorous in the way that a cold puddle is technically a bath. There's no graduation ceremony, no gentle easing into responsibility. One day, someone hands you a stick, points at a field, and says, "Make noise." That's it. Your task is to wave your arms, bang your stick, and yell nonsense until the crows decide they'd rather ruin someone else's barley. It's you against a murder of birds. You lose often. Still, it's important work. Crops mean survival, and your small frame can fit between rows and chase birds out from under hedges where the grown-ups can't go. You also learn to identify footprints, rabbit, badger, fox, and shout when something suspicious rustles in the underbrush. You're the village's smallest security guard. Before your shift in the field, you have to help prepare the morning fire. That means gathering twigs, dried grass, and occasionally cow dung. Dried dung burns surprisingly well. You don't complain too much. It's warm, and warmth is worth more than dignity, especially in the months when the frost turns your breath into little white ghosts. If you live near woods, you'll be sent for kindling or mushrooms. That's riskier. Boars roam those parts. Witches too, if you believe your older siblings. You try not to stray far, but sometimes you hear the crack of something heavy in the trees and bolt your little legs carrying you back with a bundle of moss and half the mushrooms someone else picked last week. Inside, your chores continue. You stir pottage. You fetch water. You help grind grain, which involves pushing a heavy stone circle around and around until your arms feel like wet noodles. You complain once. Someone hands you a smaller rock and says, "Fine, use this." You never complain again. Your hands become calloused. Your fingernails are permanently blackened. You develop muscles in your arms and dirt in your ears. There's no clean in the modern sense, just not currently covered in something alarming. And yet your mother still inspects your face every Sunday before church. She licks a rag and rubs at your cheeks until you resemble something closer to human. You don't go to school, not unless you're unusually lucky, and the village has a tiny church school. Even then, you'd probably attend only in winter when fields sleep under snow and your chores shrink with the daylight. But you do learn. You learn from watching, from mimicking, from the endless repetition of routine. You learn how to tie knots, how to tell a fresh egg from a rotten one, and which part of the cow's tail is safest to hold when it kicks. Evenings are a mix of exhaustion and low chatter. Your parents talk quietly while mending tools or spinning thread. You sit nearby weaving sticks into pretend swords or tracing patterns in the soot on the floor. Sometimes Someone tells a story about saints or battles or ghosts. You listen with wide eyes, believing every word, especially the terrifying ones. Sleep is not immediate. Your body is tired, but your mind races. You think of the crows that didn't fly away, of the shiny beetle you found under a rock, of the skull someone said was buried near the hedge. Eventually, warmth lulls you. The fire dies down. The cottage hums with breathing and creaking beams. You drift, and in your dreams, you're still working. You may not understand the word routine, but you live it. Day after day, the same rituals unfold. Stir, chop, carry, shout, scrub. You're learning not just tasks, but timing when to speak, when to be silent, when to run, and when to pretend you didn't hear someone calling your name. Historians still debate how young medieval children were when they began meaningful work. Some accounts suggest full participation by age 7. Others say it began even earlier. But 5-year-olds like you are definitely part of the household economy. You may not wield a scythe, but you sure as rain haul water like a champ. There are injuries, small ones mostly. Cuts from sharp tools, splinters from buckets, bruises from falling while chasing goats. If you cry, someone may comfort you, or they may tell you to toughen up. There's not much patience for lingering tears. Your wounds are cleaned with ale wrapped in linen and declared good enough. And then there are moments of freedom, brief golden fragments between chores. You chase butterflies across fields. You float leaves in puddles. You climb trees just high enough to scare yourself and low enough not to break anything important. You laugh. You forget for a moment that you're a worker in training. You're not alone. Other village children share your fate. You form little gangs. You create games from sticks and rules from nothing. Tag, hide, and seek. Who can balance a turnip on their head? You learn to barter pebbles for feathers and lie convincingly when accused of stealing someone's beetroot. Meals are quicker now. You don't need help feeding yourself, though you sometimes need help remembering to chew. Hunger drives you. You eat fast, talk fast, and get up fast, lest someone assign you a new chore mid-bite. Food is fuel, and you burn it daily. Your parents begin to trust you with more. Watching the baby, feeding the pig, carrying messages. You feel proud. You walk taller. And then you trip over a root spill, a basket of eggs, and learn the complicated art of shame. Still, you're growing. Your hands are steadier. Your back is stronger. And your place in the village feels more certain. You're no longer the baby, stumbling around in a tunic 3 sizes too big. You're part of the machinery now. One cog in a very creaky but persistent wheel. And that wheel keeps turning, whether the sun shines or the rain comes sideways. It's finally here. One of the rare days that doesn't begin with a chore or end with a complaint. A holiday, or as the village calls it, a holy day, though depending on who you ask, the ale is holier than the sermon. For you, it's the most exciting thing since that one time the goat got loose in church. A feast day, a festival, a chance to stop scaring crows and start well dancing badly near them instead. Feast days are scattered throughout the calendar, anchored to saints and seasons. Everyone looks forward to them, even if most can't quite remember which saint it is they're honoring. Is it Saint Apollonia or Saint Apollinaris? Someone asks. Who cares? Comes the reply. As long as the turnip stew has onions this time. The village transforms. People wear their slightly less dirty tunics. Someone sweeps the church steps. Banners, faded and frayed, are hauled out and tied to posts. There might even be flowers if it's spring. If it's winter, the decorations are more mud-themed. The day starts with Mass, of course. Everyone files into the tiny church, already hungry, but pretending not to be. The priest speaks in Latin, which you don't understand, but you recognize the rhythm well enough to know when to kneel, when to bow, and when to avoid making eye contact, because he's glaring again. After the service, the real fun begins. Tables, makeshift planks over barrels, are set up in the village square. Boiled turnips, sour cheese, lentils, rough bread, and if you're truly lucky, a little meat. Not much, just a few scraps from a pig that's been drying since last Michaelmas. But the taste is magnificent. It's salt, fat, and hope all in one glorious bite. You eat with your hands, you eat fast, and you eat laughing. Children sneak second helpings. Dogs lurk hopefully underfoot. Old men brag about how many feast days they've survived, and women trade gossip over slices of barley cake that taste mostly like barley and the idea of cake. The ale flows freely. It's not strong enough to make anyone poetic, but strong enough to make your uncle try dancing. He does badly. Someone brings out a lute. It's missing 2 strings, but no one minds. There's music rhythm and stamping feet. You join the dancing circle, unsure whether you're doing it right. It doesn't matter. You're spinning, giggling, dizzy. The ground tilts. Someone catches you. You shout for more. You're not the only child flying around like a windmill in wool. The village square is full of barefoot kids jumping, skipping, mock fighting with sticks. You steal an onion from a neighbor's basket and are chased 3 times around the church. You toss it back, triumphant and breathless. Sometimes there's a play. The older boys dress up as saints or devils. One wears a chicken mask and bellows something about temptation. No one knows if it's accurate theology, but it gets a laugh. You clap and shout, thrilled that sin can apparently be squawked at and chased off stage. In summer, there are outdoor games, tug-of-war, sack races, the occasional and very unofficial attempt at sheep wrestling. You're too small for most of them, but you cheer loudly and get underfoot often. In winter, the festivities move inside or closer to the fire. You press close to the warmth, your breath fogging, as you listen to tales of saints' mischief, or that one time someone drank from the wrong bucket. Evening comes. Lanterns glow with weak candlelight. Shadows grow long and soft. The grown-ups sing hymns in off-key harmony, their voices thick with ale and nostalgia. You're half asleep, head on someone's lap, the scent of onions and wool thick in the air. Historians still argue whether medieval feast days were truly joyful or merely momentary pauses in suffering. But from where you lie, it feels like magic. No plowing, no grinding, no shouting, just food laughter and that heady sense of community, of belonging. You don't understand the theology behind it. You don't know why St. Lawrence got roasted on a gridiron or what relic the priest says the church holds. Spoiler, it's a splinter. But you know this today. Life isn't quite so heavy. Today, the bread tastes better. Today, you dance like someone who hasn't had to scare a crow all week. Tomorrow, the chores return. The fields will be muddy again. The goats will escape. The fire will need stoking. But tonight, even the stars seem a little closer. And your little wooden shoes resting beside the fire don't feel quite so small. It's Sunday morning again, and the bells are calling. You rise stiffly from your shared bed, a lumpy, hay-filled sack that smells like feet and smoke, and begin the slow process of scraping yourself into something vaguely presentable. Today is not a work day. Today is for the soul. Or more accurately, for keeping the priest from glaring at your mother in front of the entire village. Your tunic is brushed off your hair, wetted with cold water and slicked down with spit. Your hands are wiped clean, though your nails still host half the garden. You trudge with the rest of your family toward the squat stone church that looms like a sacred barn at the village edge. The air smells like incense and cow. Inside, the temperature drops. The stone floor is cold, the benches harder than usual, and the windows are little more than narrow slits that let in light like knives. The priest stands at the altar in his worn robes, speaking in Latin, an elegant string of syllables that might as well be bird calls. You don't understand a word. No one does. But you recognize when to kneel, when to bow, when to avoid eye contact. What you do understand, deeply urgently, is that you are always being watched. Not just by the priest or the older woman who pinches your ear when you whisper during the sermon, but by the saints painted on the walls, by the Virgin glaring down from the altar, and by God Himself, whose gaze apparently stretches from the heavens into your very thoughts. From a very young age, you learn fear disguised as morality. Every sneeze might be the devil's work. Every temptation, be it a stolen fig, or a particularly satisfying rock you want to throw at your brother, is an opportunity for sin. And sin, you are told, leads to fire. Not the cozy hearth kind, but the eternal, screaming kind. Great bedtime material. If you chew your bread too fast, you might be punished. If you skip your prayers, you might wake up with a demon sitting on your chest. You don't really know what a demon looks like, but you're fairly sure it resembles your father in a foul mood after someone forgot to shut the pig gate. And so you behave, mostly. Out of habit, yes, but also out of terror. The line between superstition and doctrine is blurry. The priest might warn of purgatory one moment and ghosts the next. Someone whispers that your neighbor's cough is a punishment for lying. You believe it. You don't question it. There is no space for doubt. Everyone believes in something that can't be seen, and you're too busy gathering firewood to invent your own theories. Faith, fear, and folklore swirl together in your mind like smoke rising from a damp candle. Your days are peppered with rituals. Cross yourself when you pass the church. Murmur a prayer before meals. Thank St. Leonard if the cow births safely. Blame St. Anthony when your sister gets sick. Every corner of life is tagged by a saint or shadowed by sin. Your house even has small tokens of protection. A dried herb bundle hung near the door. A crude wooden cross above the hearth. Your mother may hide a relic, allegedly a splinter of some long-dead martyr, in the corner near your bed. You're not sure if it's real, but you feel safer with it there. You learn early that everything can be holy or cursed, depending on context. Bread is sacred if blessed. Bread is a warning if it's gone moldy in the shape of a face. Rain is a blessing when it waters the crops. Rain is divine punishment when it floods your root cellar. And dreams, those are serious business. You tell your mother about the one with the black dog, and she mutters about omens. Your father scoffs, but then you hear him mutter a protective prayer under his breath that night, just in case. It's not all gloom. Some saints are cheerful. Some prayers are sung, and sometimes the priest gives you a small, hard lump of blessed bread called a pax. It tastes like sawdust, but it feels important. You suck on it slowly, imagining holiness dripping into your veins. Still, the fear lingers. You worry that thinking bad thoughts is just as dangerous as doing them. That St. Peter is jotting down every time you grumble or kick a stone in frustration. And then there's Lent, when you're not supposed to smile too much, laugh too loud, or eat anything resembling joy. Historians still argue how deeply medieval peasants truly understood theology. Some say villagers had only a vague idea of heaven and hell, relying more on local superstition and church rituals than doctrine. Others argue they absorbed more than we give them credit for, filtered through sermon songs and fear. What's certain is that religion is not a Sunday hobby. It's woven into everything. You pray before planting. You pray during storms. You pray when someone coughs twice in a row. Every unexplained event is attributed to divine will or punishment. And you at 5 or 6 are already parsing your world into blessed and bewitched. You try to be good. You really do. But sometimes you hit your brother with a spoon. Sometimes you think about stealing a honeycomb. Sometimes you fall asleep during evening prayers and dream about St. Nicholas chasing you with a frying pan. You wake up terrified and vow to do better. And through it all, the church stands. Its bell tolls, its priest speaks, and you, small and muddy, try to keep your soul clean in a world that thinks dirt is next to godliness because there's not much choice. By the time you reach your early teens, around 12 or 13, your body has outpaced your wisdom. You've grown taller, your voice may have cracked, and your strength has begun to match the work you're assigned. But your teeth, they're already rotting. Bread so coarse, it could sand a tabletop, and the steady absence of dental hygiene have taken their toll. You chew with the good side of your mouth and spit discreetly when something aches. No one has a full set of teeth. Even the priest whistles when he speaks. But the loss of teeth doesn't slow the rhythm of peasant life. You're becoming an adult now, or at least treated like one. And among your many unspoken responsibilities, there's a new and awkward pressure. Find someone to marry. Not necessarily right this minute, but soon. Time is short. Life expectancy is shorter. If you don't pair off early, you may miss your moment entirely. Your first crush is a blur of wool and dirt. Maybe it's the shepherd's daughter who tossed you a berry when no one was looking, or the son of the reeve who somehow managed to scrub the mud off his face before church. Courtship is brief and unsubtle. Flirting means teasing, throwing sticks, or daring someone to cross a swollen creek. If they do and don't fall, that's love. If they do fall well, it's still kind of love, just wetter. There are no love letters. Most people can't write. Instead, You leave a flower on a windowsill or whisper something bold during the maypole dance. You might even carve your initials into the bark of a tree or press a token, a coin, a ribbon, a dried herb into someone's hand during festival. Your family watches. Your mother raises an eyebrow. Your father says nothing, but you can feel the pressure mounting. You're nearly old enough to marry, which means you're expected to start thinking about baby's land and whether you can afford your own cooking pot. Emotions are secondary. Marriages are alliances between laborers, not poems. The village whispers. He's sweet on Agnes, someone says, and Agnes throws a turnip at them. But you know, she didn't throw it that hard. Meanwhile, your life is still tethered to survival. You might be old enough to fancy someone, but you're also expected to repair fences, carry thatch, and manage livestock. Romance, if it exists, must happen between shifts of back-breaking work. You're lucky if you see your sweetheart more than once a week, probably during chores. Sheep watching becomes oddly romantic. When it rains and the fields are too wet to work, that's when real bonding happens. Everyone crams under one roof, and suddenly you're sitting across from the girl whose braid you tugged in spring. You try not to stare. She smirks when you spill your ale. You consider that a good sign. There's no age of consent as we understand it today. Marriage happens young often, in the mid-teens. By modern standards, it's alarming. But in your world, where disease and famine loom close, time waits for no one. Girls marry after their first period. Boys, once they can work a full day without collapsing. There's no formal dating, no proposals, just a progression. You're seen together often enough that people assume you've chosen. Parental approval matters. If your families agree, you're as good as wed. If not, things get tricky. A disapproved match might be broken with threats, tears, or pressure from the lord of the manor. Most peasants don't marry for love, but they hope for kindness. A partner who doesn't yell too much, who won't drink away the winter grain, who might let you sleep in when it snows. Betrothals can be as casual as a shared drink and handshake. Sometimes they're more formal, marked by tokens and village witness. The local priest prefers a church ceremony, but many couples are considered married by present consent, a public declaration that you are essentially stuck with each other now. The bedding comes next. Private, yes, but not necessarily alone. There may be witnesses or laughter through thin walls. For girls, marriage is a gamble. Childbirth is deadly. You've seen the shadow cross your mother's face when someone mentions last year's loss. And yet, it's expected. Children are labor. The more hands, the better. You pray for health, but you expect hardship. Your wife may lose children, so might you. But you try anyway. That's what people do. For boys, marriage means responsibility. You must provide somehow. That might mean renting a scrap of land, working as a servant, or sharing a roof with your in-laws until you can afford your own. Privacy is rare. Romance is quieter. Your idea of love is saving her the soft part of the bread, or standing between her and the reeve when his mood turns. And still, there's tenderness. At night, curled against the cold, you listen to your wife breathe. You trace the curve of her spine through the homespun blanket and whisper nonsense in the dark. In a world that rarely pauses, these moments matter. You may not know the word intimacy, but you live it in shared aches and laughter over burnt stew, in the quiet sorrow when she buries her third child and doesn't speak for 2 days. You don't talk about love, but sometimes you hold her hand until she sleeps, and that's enough. Marriage, like everything in peasant life, is practical, worn, and full of dirt, but in its quiet way, it's also beautiful. The wedding itself is not what you might expect. There are no ivory dresses or rings tucked in velvet boxes, no bridesmaids, no speeches, no string quartet. What there is more than anything is ale, and lots of it. Your marriage begins not with a kiss, but with a deal. Marriage in the medieval village is both a sacrament and a contract, and while the priest is happy to bless your union with all the usual Latin incantations, the real agreement is struck between families. Your parents shake hands. Hers hand over a dowry, maybe a goat, a sack of grain, or a few coins hoarded for years. If you're lucky, a small plot of land comes with her. If not, you'll keep sleeping behind your parents' pigsty until you can build your own shack. The wedding is mostly talk. The priest mutters through a short ceremony. You both say yes, or at least grunt in the right places. Maybe there's a kiss, maybe just a nod. But the real ritual, the one everyone looks forward to, happens after the church. There's ale. Warm, thick, earthy ale brewed by someone's aunt in a barrel that's older than you are. Everyone drinks. Children sneak sips. Elders hoist mugs and talk about the good old days before taxes were this bad. Someone brings out a bagpipe. It sounds like a goat being stepped on, but everyone claps anyway. Tables groan under modest offerings. A wheel of cheese, salted fish, stewed beans, pickled eggs, and whatever animal was unlucky enough to be slaughtered for the occasion. It's not much, but it's more than anyone has seen in months. You and your new spouse eat together, breaking bread with your bare hands and trying not to spill it on your only good tunic. Guests offer jokes, some cleaner than others. Your uncle makes a toast and promptly falls over. Someone sings a bawdy ballad about Saint Agnes and the baker's boy. A child shouts the punchline before the joke is finished. Laughter explodes like thunder in the cramped room. Eventually, the guests will shout for the bedding. Yes, that's a thing. In some villages, it's symbolic, just a parade to the bedroom with cheering and teasing. In others, the crowd follows, piling into the tiny house, laughing, leering, pushing the couple onto the bed while shouting encouragements. It's humiliating and loud. Your spouse blushes. You pretend to enjoy it. The bed creaks. Someone starts a chant. Eventually, everyone leaves or passes out. And now it's quiet. Just the two of you. The fire flickers low. You're both still fully dressed, tired and sore from the day. You look at each other, grinning awkwardly. If you consummate the marriage tonight, it might be under a blanket, still smelling faintly of stew and chickens. If you don't, well, the village will just assume you did anyway. Either way, you're now husband and wife. You settle into married life quickly. There's no honeymoon, no travel, no gifts beyond a broom or patched cooking pot. You rise at dawn and tend the fire. Your spouse milks the goat. You feed the pigs. Life doesn't pause for romance. Your home is still just one room, maybe two, If you're exceptionally fortunate or resourceful, you cook, sleep, and raise children all in the same space. Privacy is a rumor. Conversations are always whispered. Intimacy is stolen in moments behind a haystack under the stars, or when the children are too tired to notice. Over time, your marriage becomes less about love and more about teamwork. You learn each other's rhythms. She knows when your knee will ache. You know the face she makes when she's about to cry, but won't let herself. There are arguments about chores, about missing chickens, about your mother's constant visits, but also silent comfort when one of you falls sick or loses a sibling to plague or accident. Marriage is not a grand romance, but it's a partnership forged by necessity, shaped by hardship, and sometimes even strengthened by shared laughter. When a child is born and survives, you both look at each other wide-eyed and trembling, realizing that somehow, against the odds, you've built a new life out of mud, wood, and whispered prayers. The church visits occasionally to remind you of your duties. Be faithful, be fruitful, and remember that every child is a blessing, even when they scream like banshees and throw porridge at the priest. You nod solemnly, then go back to patching the roof. By now, the village knows you as a couple. Your names are said together: Tom and Maggie, Will and Elsbeth. People come to you for advice, for gossip, for a borrowed scythe. Your home might be small, but it's yours. Your story, like thousands of others, is woven into the fields, echoed in the church bells, and etched in the smoke curling from your hearth. This is marriage by the ale barrel raw real, and built less on promises than on persistence. Not a love story, perhaps, but a survival story. And sometimes that's even more powerful. Your home is now full, not just with people, but with sound, with mess, with breath, and life, and exhaustion. One room, one fire, one bed that creaks ominously when the wind blows wrong, and 6 children, all under the age of 12, all seemingly determined to talk, shout, cry, or sleep at precisely the same moment. There is no privacy. None. Every movement, every murmur, every bodily noise is witnessed by at least 3 other people. If you're lucky, they're too tired to comment. But more often, someone laughs, or mimics it, or asks, "What was that noise?" You and your spouse now sleep wedged between toddlers and a flea-ridden blanket. The straw mattress is lumpy damp at the edges, and home to a thriving community of uninvited insects. One child kicks in their sleep, another snores. A third whispers to the dog who lies across everyone's feet like a hairy furnace. Morning begins with a squawk, or a cough, or a shout that someone wet the bed. Again. You roll up your sleeves and start the day with your sleeves already rolled up. You rise before the sun and fumble through a routine that somehow takes longer every day and still never feels done. Breakfast is a chaotic affair. The youngest flings porridge across the floor. The eldest steals someone's bread. You sigh. You serve. You sip weak ale and chew stale crust and pretend that the burnt part is the best part. There's no time for quiet reflection, or chewing properly, or sitting. Everyone has chores, even the little ones. One gathers eggs. One watches the fire. One is supposed to chase the geese away, but ends up covered in mud and goose bites instead. You herd children like sheep, only less obedient, and more likely to bite each other when you're not looking. And speaking of sheep, you probably have one, maybe two. They're not outside. They live in the house, or at least under the same roof. There's no barn, just a partition of old wood and prayers. The animals stay close because warmth matters more than smell. You stop noticing the stink eventually, or you convince yourself you do. There's no toilet, that's outside. Maybe, if it's not raining, and you can find a dry patch of field. Inside, you have a chamber pot, maybe two, both well-used, poorly emptied, and constantly argued over. Children knock them over in the night. No one claims responsibility. Bathing is rare. Once a week, if you're lucky. Once a month, if you're realistic. A wooden tub near the hearth filled with water that started warm and ends with complaints. Everyone takes turns. Same water. Smallest first. Eldest last. You try not to think about the order. Clothes are few. Mended, patched, shared. When one child outgrows a tunic, it goes to the next. If it still has both sleeves, you're ahead of the game. Laundry is a nightmare. Washed in cold water with lye soap that burns your hands and bleaches your patience. You hang garments on ropes above the fire and hope they dry before someone knocks them down. Illness spreads fast in one room. A cough in the corner becomes a chorus by week's end. A rash becomes a family event. You boil herbs. You pray. You consult the village healer, who may offer dried nettles and a story about how St. Blaise once cured a boy by stuffing him with bread. You nod. You try it. You get no alone time. None. If you want to cry, you go outside and pretend to chop wood. If you want to talk privately, you whisper in the dark and hope the children are asleep, or at least pretending. If you want to think, you can't, not clearly, not for long, and yet this chaos is yours. The noise, the mess, the constant shuffle of bare feet on dirt floor, it's home. You've built it one child at a time, one bowl of stew after another. The children squabble, yes, but they also laugh. They help. They hug you with sticky hands and demand stories you've told 100 times. And you tell them again. The house groans with age. The roof leaks. The beams creak. The door sticks in summer and barely closes in winter. The smoke clings to every surface, turning the walls a permanent shade of cabbage brown. But the fire burns. The pot bubbles. And most nights, no one freezes. There are moments of quiet when the children sleep. When the embers glow soft and orange. When you and your spouse sit close without speaking, listening to the silence thrum. Those moments are rare, but they matter. They remind you that this small, cramped, noisy world is something you've kept alive. Somehow. Historians often write about peasant households in terms of numbers people per room hearths, per family calories consumed. But behind those numbers is a truth more complicated and more human. One room can hold a universe. One fire can warm a dozen hearts. One bed can carry the dreams and burdens of an entire family. And so you endure. You make space where there is none. You carve privacy from whispers. You survive together. In a world that offers little comfort, this one room, this mess, this tangled heap of life is yours. Dawn breaks and your day begins, not with bird song, or serenity, but with the stiff ache in your back and the groan of wood as you hoist your plow into the cold morning. Welcome to adulthood as a peasant land-bound, back-bent, and beholden to almost everyone but yourself. You're not a landowner. No peasant is not really. The patch of earth you work is technically the Lord's. He might let you call it yours, might even refer to you as a tenant. But the truth is simple. You farm it, he owns it. And in return for the privilege of tilling his soil, you owe him labor rent and gratitude, usually in that order. Your tools are basic wooden plows, reinforced with iron, dragged by oxen that are hungrier than you are. If you're lucky, your village pools resources and shares a pair of oxen among several families. If not, you drag the plow yourself, digging grooves through damp, stubborn earth with the help of your eldest son and the force of sheer will. The soil is rarely kind. In some places, it's thick clay that clings to your boots like hungry dough. In others, it's sandy, too dry to hold a decent root. And yet you dig, day after day, turning the land before planting, praying for rain that doesn't turn into flood and sun that doesn't turn into drought. Spring is planting season. You scatter seeds by hand, barley, oats, rye, wheat if you're daring and the soil's forgiving. There are no machines, no irrigation. Just your hands, your back, and prayers to saints with specialties in crops. You mutter to Saint Isidore while planting onions. Saint Fiacre gets the beans. In summer, you weed and chase away pests. Deer, rabbits, birds, everything wants a piece of what you're growing. So you build crude fences. You string up shiny bits of cloth to scare birds. You assign children to shout at anything with fur or feathers. They shout often. Autumn is harvest. Your scythe slices through golden stalks while a sweat pours down your back. You bundle, thresh, and winnow with aching arms, separating grain from chaff in long, rhythmic swings. The whole village smells of dust and sweat and hope. Then comes the accounting. The first portion of your harvest that goes to the church. It's called a tithe, 1/10 of everything you've grown collected by the village priest, with a solemn nod and a wide basket. He thanks you with a blessing and walks away with enough barley to make your winter porridge feel a little thinner. The next portion goes to the Lord. You owe him grain livestock eggs, whatever he demands that season. Sometimes it's not a fixed rate. Sometimes it's whatever he feels like taking. You complain quietly. Then give him more than you can afford, because to refuse is to risk eviction fines or worse. What's left, that's yours. Maybe. You store it in sacks hidden in corners where rats and mold can't find it. You seal jars with wax. You hang meat in the rafters. You pray the winter is kind, because if it's not, you'll be boiling nettles and pretending they taste like cabbage before January ends. You also owe labor. A few days a week, sometimes more, you must abandon your own fields and work the Lord's domain, the portion of land he keeps for himself. You plow his soil. You harvest his grain. You repair his fences for free, because that's part of the deal. These are called corvée duties, obligations of labor instead of money. They're exhausting, disruptive, and deeply resented, but no one dares skip them. The reeve, a kind of peasant, overseer, keeps lists. He visits homes, checks, tools, reports, absences. He used to be your neighbor. Now, he's the Lord's voice in a wool tunic. Taxes are everywhere. Besides tithes and labor, you pay in countless smaller ways. A coin for using the mill, a handful of eggs to cross a certain bridge, a sack of flour to graze your pig in the woods. Even when you grow your own food, it feels like someone else is always eating first. There are fines, too. If your fence collapses and a sheep escapes, you pay. If you bake bread outside the Lord's oven, you pay. If your dog bites someone, if your child steals a turnip, if your cartwheel breaks and blocks the path, you pay. Sometimes in coins, sometimes in grain, always in dignity. It's a cycle. You work, you yield, you give, you survive. Then you do it again. And yet you find rhythms in it. You wake with purpose. You measure the seasons not in dates, but in smells and sounds, the wet scent of tilled soil in March, the hiss of scythes in August, the crunch of frost on barley in October. The land, though cruel, is familiar. You know where it yields best, where the mushrooms hide, where the hawks nest. You know which tree blooms first in spring and which patch floods first in rain. The landscape isn't yours by law, but it is yours by love. You've bled into its dirt. You've buried children under its trees. You've watched the sun rise from the same ridge for 30 years. The tithes, the labor, the backaches, they grind you down. But they also shape you. Your hands are scarred and steady. Your posture hunched but purposeful. Your legs thick from trudging through mud and defiance. Historians sometimes ask whether medieval peasants were truly miserable or merely weary. The answer is both. You ache, you struggle, you know hunger, but you also know pride. You raised food from dirt. You built shelter from wood and thatch. You raised children on love and lentils. You did what needed doing, no applause, just survival. And in a world where the Lord's fields stretch beyond sight and the church's reach extends into your very dreams, even that is a quiet kind of rebellion. It starts with a cough. Not yours at first, but the baby's. Then your middle child starts wheezing. Then your wife begins to shiver, pulling her shawl tighter, even as the hearth glows hot. By nightfall, the house sounds like a choir of wet lungs. And there's no doctor coming. You live in a world where illness is constant and care is rudimentary. Sickness isn't rare, it's expected. Part of life. An inconvenience in its mildest form. A death sentence in its worst. Your knowledge of medicine is a mixture of superstition, oral tradition, and whatever the village healer can remember from her grandmother. The tools at your disposal are few. You don't have soap. That's for the rich, and even they use it sparingly. Instead, you rely on water that's often too cold to wash with and too questionable to drink without ale in it. You try to keep clean, but your hands are permanently stained by soil, and your clothes haven't been truly clean in years. The idea of germs is a few centuries away. When someone falls ill, you do what you've always done. Light candles to a saint. Saint Sebastian for plague, Saint Roch for fever, Saint Apollonia for toothache. You murmur prayers, hoping heaven's listening. You brew teas made of whatever herbs you foraged: nettle for strength, elderberry for fever, garlic for everything. Because garlic is practically medieval penicillin. The village healer arrives. She smells of mint and mildew and carries pouches of dried roots, strange powders, and amulets made from teeth. She offers advice in riddles, speaks of humors out of balance, and prescribes poultices that sting more than soothe. You follow her instructions anyway. What else can you do? A fever takes your youngest. Her skin burns hot. Her eyes glaze over, and her breath rattles like dry leaves. You soak cloths in rainwater, place them on her brow, and try not to cry in front of your other children. They've seen death before, but this is their sister. You remember the last village epidemic, the one that took 3 children and the miller's wife in a single week. People whispered it was divine punishment, or bad air, or that the well had gone sour. You don't know what caused it. You just know the fear that soaked every cough, every step toward the priest's door. Sometimes the church offers help. The priest might come and bless the sick bed, muttering Latin as he sprinkles holy water. He'll tell you to confess to cleanse your soul. He'll remind you that suffering brings you closer to Christ, that your child, should she die, may join the angels if her sins are few. It doesn't make it easier. You try not to think about the graveyard, but it's there, just beyond the churchyard, marked with crude wooden crosses and sunken soil. You've dug there before, shovel in hand, heart in pieces. You don't want to go back. Sanitation is non-existent. Waste is tossed into ditches or the pig pen. Water is fetched from the same stream where clothes are washed and animals wade. There's no sewage system, no separation of clean from filthy. You've learned to ignore the smells, but your body pays the price. Boils, sores, coughing fits. These are normal. A bad cut can mean death. So can childbirth. So can the winter chill that seeps into your bones when the fire dies too soon. You know people who vanished overnight, struck down by something invisible. You bury them quickly and pray just as fast. If you manage to survive the fevers and infections, your body still carries the marks. Arthritis stiffens your fingers. Your teeth ache constantly, blackened stumps that you chew with sideways. Your joints crack when you rise. You limp through your 30s like a man twice your age. And yet you endure. You patch wounds with cobwebs, wash rashes with vinegar, and chew willow bark for pain. You wrap sore limbs with cloth soaked in hot wine. You boil everything you can, if only to believe it might help. Children die often. That's the truth. You name them, baptize them, and bury them sometimes within the same season. There's grief, but it's quiet. People comfort you with phrases like God's will or heaven needed another angel. You nod hollow. Then return to your chores. Women suffer most. Childbirth is the ultimate gamble, pain, blood, and the real possibility that either mother or baby or both won't survive. Your wife has lost 2. One was stillborn, the other died in her arms 3 days later. She doesn't talk about them, but sometimes she stares at nothing while stirring the pot lips pressed thin. There's no hospital. The nearest town might have a physician, a man with leeches and an expensive robe, but he won't come here. Not for you, not for a peasant. Even if he did, you couldn't pay him, so you lean on each other. The healer, the priest, your spouse. You whisper hopes to saints carved from wood, and you wait. Recovery is slow, if it comes at all. The child's fever breaks, and she sleeps for a full day breath, soft and thin. You watch her chest rise and fall like it's the only thing that matters. When she opens her eyes, weak but alive, you thank every saint by name, including some you might have made up. But for every recovery, there's a loss. And the morning is brief. Life must go on. The field needs plowing, the bread must rise, the animals must eat. You grieve while working grief, pressed into every motion like a bruise beneath the skin. You tell your children stories about saints who healed the sick, with a touch about miracles that raised the dead. They listen wide-eyed, coughing into their sleeves. You want them to believe, because belief is often all you have. Historians sometimes remark that peasants were resilient, but what they mean is peasants had no choice. Sickness came often stayed too long and left scars that rarely faded. You did not conquer illness. You survived it if you could. And survival in this life is the only miracle you dare to hope for. Rain falls on your field, heavy and relentless. It pools in the furrows you spent weeks digging and drowns the fragile shoots just beginning to sprout. The barley turns to mush. The rye never gets a chance. You stand in the doorway of your hut, arms folded, watching weeks of labor wash away into gray slurry. Your harvest, your winter food gone. And then comes the bailiff smiling as he announces that taxes are still due. Because it doesn't matter that the rain destroyed your crop. It doesn't matter that last year's yield was thin, or that you've been living off onion soup and yesterday's bread crusts. The tithe is still expected. The Lord's rent is still due. And if you can't pay in grain, then you'll pay in labor. More days working his field, more hours mending his fences, cutting his firewood, tending his livestock, while yours go hungry. In a dry year, it's worse. The sun bakes the earth to powder. Seeds shrivel in the ground. The stream dries to a trickle. Your animals collapse in the heat, and still the reeve knocks on your door. "A shilling short this quarter," he says, pretending to care. You try to explain there was no barley. He shrugs. The Lord doesn't eat excuses. That's the curse of peasant life. You're punished, whether the earth blesses you or breaks you. If the harvest is good, taxes rise because clearly you can afford more. If it's poor, well, taxes still rise because the Lord still has feasts to throw, wars to fund, and debts to settle. Your labor is his safety net. You owe the church 1/10 of your produce. But that's only the beginning. There's the tallage, a tax levied at the Lord's discretion. There's the merched, a fee paid when your daughter marries. There's the heriot, a death tax. When your father dies, the Lord takes your best animal as payment for the privilege of continuing to live on the land. And if you try to resist, if you grumble too loudly or pay too slowly, there's the fine. A coin here, a bushel there. Eventually, you realize that every time you think you've paid what's owed, there's more. The system is a sieve, and your livelihood trickles through it. You pay to use the mill which belongs to the Lord. Even though you grew the grain, even though you carried it there on your back, he gets a share just because the stone belongs to him. You pay to use the communal oven. You pay to graze your pigs in the woods. You even pay to fish in the river that runs past your field. Everything is taxed, even survival. And yet the coins you earn, if you see any, are few and precious. Barter is more common. A pair of eggs for a spool of thread, a sack of beans for a day's help building a roof. Real money is rare. When you finally do hold a silver penny in your hand, it feels like power. Until you realize it's already spoken for. The Lord has retainers men who carry swords and a list of names. The reeve records what you owe. The steward delivers the summons. If you fall behind too far, they take what they please. Your tools, your oxen, your child's blanket. You try not to think about what's next. You've seen it happen. A neighbor lost his cow to the Harriet. Another fled in the night after failing to pay his tallage. He left behind a broken cart and a hut that now sits empty, a warning in mud and silence. No one talks about him openly, but everyone glances at the door when taxes come due, wondering who'll vanish next. And then there are the royal taxes. When the king decides to wage war again, he sends messengers to collect coin for the crown. The sheriffs come with official seals and speak of duty and loyalty. You hand over your last half penny, wondering why loyalty feels like starvation. There's a saying in the village, only the dead pay no tax. But even that's not true. Because when your father died, the church took his cross. The Lord took his mule. And you, still grieving, took his place in the fields along with his debts. Sometimes you try to imagine a life without taxes. You picture fields tilled only for your family. Bread made without owing half to someone else. A home where what you grow stays in your larder. But it's just a dream. The system is older than memory, and your place in it is fixed. Historians call this the feudal economy, a delicate balance of obligation and protection. But from where you stand, waist deep in mud, it feels more like a trap, a contract you never signed, written in hunger and enforced with spears. And yet, you endure. You find ways to scrape by. You save the biggest onions for trade. You make shoes last another season. You teach your children how to hide a bit of grain beneath the floorboards. Not because you're dishonest, but because you're tired of watching your work feed someone else. You laugh when you can. You sing while you work. You keep a tally in your head of how much you owe, how much you've paid, and how much more you can give before something breaks. And when it rains too hard or doesn't rain at all, you grit your teeth and push forward, because that's what peasants do. You live at the mercy of the skies and the mercy of men who have none. You're 40 years old. Your hair is streaked with gray. Your back aches every morning, and your knees sound like a gravel path every time you kneel. You're not considered elderly yet, but you are, by medieval standards, undeniably old. If you make it to 50, you'll be among the lucky few. Your hands are calloused and cracked. Your teeth, what's left of them, are blackened nubs jagged at the edges, good for soft bread and little else. Your joints complain with each movement. There are days when the simple act of standing feels like lifting a cartwheel with your spine. The younger ones in the village, those wild-legged teenagers with smooth skin and unbroken bones, call you old man, even if you're barely out of your third decade. They ask you for stories about famines, the year the river froze solid, or the great fire that burned half the manor fields. You oblige mostly because it feels good to be asked for something other than work. You've outlived many. friends buried in shallow graves beneath crooked wooden crosses, children who never made it past their second winter, a brother lost to a sudden fever, wife if you've married again since her passing, who may now cough in her sleep, wrapped in wool and memory. Your body is a map of every hardship. The crooked finger from that time the ox kicked you, the bad hip from falling on ice during the winter of 14, the scar on your arm where the sickle slipped during harvest. Each mark is a story, each story a lesson. You've become a living archive of survival, but you still work. There's no retirement, no pension, no quiet years spent tending a garden while sipping wine under a vine-draped porch. You work because, if you don't, no one eats. The youngest need food. The animals need tending. The field, stubborn as ever, needs your hands. Your role shifts, though. You may no longer be expected to haul timber or dig irrigation ditches, but your experience is valued. You become the one who remembers how to keep the goats from the barley, how to smoke meat just right, how to spot the difference between a healing wound and a festering one. You're still tired, but useful. If you have grown children, they now carry the heaviest burdens. You watch with a strange mix of pride and guilt as your son pulls the plow you once dragged. Your daughter mends clothes by firelight, humming the same songs your mother once sang. You pass on your skills, your stories, your warnings. It's your inheritance, meager but meaningful. But old age is not gentle here. Your eyes begin to fail. Threads blur. Shadows stretch wrong. You squint at everything. You start to miss your footing on familiar paths. Your hearing dulls. The world softens not kindly, but with the distance of someone forgetting your name. And the winters hit harder. The cold seeps into your bones and stays. Fires seem smaller. Blankets feel thinner. You huddle closer to the hearth, your knees drawn up your joints, stiffening into rust. A simple cold lingers longer than it should. A cough might last weeks. Every ache carries a whisper of finality. Still you endure. You sit near the fire, whittling wood, telling tales, correcting a child's grip on a tool. When someone is born, you offer a blessing. When someone dies, you help dig the grave. Slowly, carefully. One shovel of earth at a time. If you're fortunate, people listen to you. The village elder, they might call you. Or just the old one. They may ask for advice on planting, on marriage, on how to deal with the reeve when he starts sniffing around too close to the grain sacks. You speak sparingly. You've learned that wisdom is best served quiet, but not everyone listens. The young believe in shortcuts, in easy answers, in saints that answer quickly. You watch them run headlong into the same mistakes you once made, knowing there's no stopping them. Only learning. You shake your head and smile, or sigh. You've seen the land change. Fields once thick with barley, now stubborn with weeds. Streams that ran full now, trickling weakly in dry years. You've watched the manor lord's son grow into a man who taxes twice as hard and smiles half as often. You've heard the whispers of distant wars and wondered if your village will survive the next levy. You've also seen joy. A wedding dance beneath the full moon. A healthy child born with all 10 fingers and a loud cry. The miracle of a harvest that came in full and fast. You store these moments like candles, small lights for dark nights. There is no guarantee that your final days will be peaceful. Many peasants die not in bed, but in the field, or beside the hearth, with a cough too deep to fix. There's no physician. If you're lucky, someone will fetch the priest to offer last rites. He'll press oil on your brow and whisper promises of paradise. If your family can afford it, they'll bury you in a graveyard near the church. If not, a simple hole in blessed ground must do. They'll mark the spot with wood, maybe a carving, maybe just your name if someone remembers to say it aloud. And after that, life continues. The fields must be plowed, the goats fed. Your name lingers for a while in stories and habits passed down in the way your grandson swings a hammer. Then it fades as all names do. Historians will later wonder what you thought, whether you found meaning in your labor, whether you knew joy. But your life wasn't meant for books or monuments. It was meant for bread, for children, for firelight, for soil. You didn't ask for greatness, only enough. And perhaps that in the end is the truest measure of endurance. You die quietly, no fanfare, no solemn parade, just a deepening silence, a shallow breath, a final rattle in the chest, and then stillness. There's no doctor to pronounce it, no certificate to mark the time, only the tears of your spouse, the bowed heads of your children, and the murmurs of neighbors who've seen this many times before. In a medieval village, death isn't rare, it's expected. It arrives like a change in weather, sometimes sudden, sometimes the slow, but always sure. You pass in the same room where you were born, beneath the same smoke-darkened rafters, with the same straw mattress cradling your limbs. The village responds the only way it knows how, with ritual. Your body is washed by family, or the village women, as is custom. Warm water, linen cloth, and quiet sobs. They close your eyes, fold your arms, and place a wooden cross in your hands if one can be spared. If not, a bundle of herbs will have to do. You are wrapped in a shroud wool. If your family can afford it, plain flax, if not, and laid out for the vigil. The neighbors arrive. They shuffle in with hunched backs and low voices, casting glances at your still frame. Someone lights a candle. Someone else brings bread. No one speaks of you in grand terms, but they speak, and that's enough. Worked hard, says one. Never let the fire die, says another. Your children sit by the hearth, silent, numb. They don't cry much. They've seen death before. But they look smaller now, as if the room's center has collapsed. Your spouse sits closest, eyes red but dry. There are no words left, only the weight of what's been left behind. The priest arrives. He's not in a hurry. He's performed this ritual dozens of times. He says the words in Latin, sprinkles holy water on your brow, and offers the final prayer. You are forgiven. You are welcomed into God's kingdom. You are officially gone. Then comes the burial. The churchyard, with its leaning crosses and sunken graves, waits like an open ledger. Your sons dig the hole. The soil is cold, damp, reluctant. The priest stands nearby, muttering the same blessing he's spoken for years his breath visible in the morning air. You are lowered, gently wrapped tightly, resting on a bed of clay. The earth returns slowly, shovel after shovel, thump after thump. A cross is placed at the head of the grave, carved with your name, if there's time, if there's wood, if someone remembers how to spell it. And then strangely, inevitably, comes the ale. It's tradition. No one questions it. After the burial, the village gathers in someone's hut, or in the tavern if one exists. There is bread, there is cheese, there is weak stew and watery ale, and there is laughter, soft, tentative. At first, then louder, because mourning cannot last forever, because life must continue, because even in grief, the body needs warmth. This is your funeral feast. It is not lavish. No silver platters or candlelit toasts, just rough cups, shared food, and stories. Stories about you. About that time you chased the pig into the church. About how you always burned the first loaf, but never the second. About the song you used to hum when planting onions. Your name is spoken with fondness and sometimes amusement. A child giggles. An elder raises a cup. Someone starts singing not a hymn, but a village tune, rough and rowdy, a reminder that the living are still alive. This is how peasants say goodbye. Not with marble tombs or gilded coffins, but with shared memories and stale ale. You are remembered not for glory or wealth, but for constancy, for being there, for showing up every day in the mud and the cold with your sleeves rolled up and your eyes tired. Your possessions, few as they are distributed. The good knife goes to your eldest, the patched cloak to your widow. The boots still sturdy are sized down for the youngest son. Nothing is wasted, nothing can be. Every item is touched with your history, and now it continues without you. The church records your passing in the parish register. A single line, a name, a date, a small note. God rest him. That's it. Your life reduced to ink on parchment, to be read centuries later by someone wondering what life was like back then. They won't know your voice. They won't know how you laughed or how your hands smelled of hay and smoke. But the people here do. And for now, that's what matters. Days pass. The fire is stoked again. The field is plowed. The bread is kneaded. Life resumes its old rhythm, now missing one steady beat. Your children take on more. Your spouse speaks your name a little less. And one day, the newest baby learns to walk across the floorboards you once swept. Historians might ask, what was a medieval peasant's legacy? And the answer isn't in monuments or titles. It's in the way your family keeps going. In the stories told around fires. In the seeds planted in soil you once turned with your own hands. Your funeral is not an end. It is a thread woven into the long, rough tapestry of your village, your land, your people. You lived, you worked, you died, and in doing so, you became part of something that endures. Close your eyes. It's the year 1287. You're about to be born, not in a hospital, but in a one-room hut made of wattle and daub, where the floor is hardened earth, and the midwife is also the village herb woman pig wrangler and sometimes accused witch. Your mother lies on a straw mattress, groaning quietly so as not to attract the attention of curious goats. The smell in the air is rich smoke from the hearth damp wool, the faint tang of manure. In the corner, a wooden bowl filled with tepid water and dried sage is supposed to keep bad spirits away. The saints are watching. So are the chickens. You arrive not with a cry, but a series of wet squelches swaddled hastily in a linen scrap and held up to the flickering firelight. You are inspected for signs, birthmarks, extra fingers, unlucky twitches. All is well enough. You are not cursed, not yet. You are baptized within days, if not hours. In the eyes of the church, an unbaptized baby who dies well, they don't make it to heaven. So the local priest is summoned with haste, often before your mothers even sat up. A few Latin words, a cold splash of holy water, and you are officially a soul. Your crib is a hollowed-out log, or perhaps just a bundle of hay beside the hearth. You sleep beside the rest of your family, mother, father, siblings, maybe a widowed aunt, and at least one dog. There's no nursery. There's barely a door. And so your life begins, wrapped in straw, bathed once a season, named after your grandfather or a saint or whichever relative didn't just die of coughing. Welcome to the world, little peasant. By the time you can walk, and that's roughly the time you stop being swaddled, you are considered useful, not important, not precious, just slightly less helpless. You toddle after your mother as she feeds chickens and turns compost. Soon, you're handed your first responsibility, keeping the crows away. It's not glamorous, but it's a start. You wave a stick at the sky and shout at birds with names you can't yet pronounce. There are no toys, but there are endless tasks. You learn to collect kindling. You help spin threadshell peas, and if your tiny fingers are nimble enough, pull lice from the dog's ears. It's all part of your unofficial education, because the village has no school. Letters are for monks. You'll learn everything you need to know from watching copying and surviving. By age 5, your chores have expanded. You carry buckets of water, though you spill half. You tend to the goat, though it tries to bite you. You are scolded, corrected, hugged, only occasionally, and told to be quiet when adults are talking, which is always. Your clothes are hand-me-downs, patched and stained, tied with bits of twine. Shoes, if you're lucky, but the ground is familiar. Mud becomes a texture, not an obstacle. Playtime exists, but it's indistinguishable from work. You chase chickens not for fun, but because they escaped the pen. You shape dolls from turnips, but only with the knife used to gut fish. You laugh, but quietly, because someone is always sick, always mourning, or just praying for more barley. And when night falls, you lie down in the same space where you peeled onions, swept soot, and spilled milk earlier that day. Your lullaby is the distant howl of wolves, or worse, the silence that means they're close. You dream of summer. You dream of bread. You dream of being big enough to climb trees, or at least big enough to be taken seriously. That will come soon. Perhaps too soon. By the time you're 7, your knees are more scab than skin. You've fallen into thorn bushes, tripped over chickens, and once got stung by a bee that had taken up residence in your father's boot. You cried for a moment, then were told to fetch water for the bleeding. Medical care, such as it is, consists of spit cloth and prayer. Your mother chews herbs and presses them to your wounds. If the scrape looks serious, she might consult the herb woman, who also serves as the midwife, the matchmaker, and on occasion, the subject of suspicious glances during storms. Illness is a frequent visitor. A sniffle becomes a fever, and a fever becomes a vigil. There's no concept of germs. Sickness comes from bad air, sin, or witches. You are told to avoid walking past crossroads after sundown, especially if you hear laughter and see no one. To heal you, people might hang a bit of iron above your bed or murmur the name of Saint Apollonia, patron of toothaches. For rashes, it's Saint Anthony. For a persistent cough, burn a feather and inhale the smoke, preferably while someone sings a psalm. Sometimes you're taken to the parish priest, who sprinkles holy water and instructs your parents to fast. If you vomit after, that's considered a good sign. The devil is leaving your belly, they say. You do feel better, though it might just be because you're finally left alone. You learn to associate every affliction with a saint, a sin, or something you ate in the woods. You avoid certain mushrooms, not because they're poisonous, you don't know the word, but because your cousin ate one and hasn't spoken since. Your body is constantly healing, cracking, itching, and aching. You survive on bread pottage and hope. And if you are very lucky, your cuts become scars, not curses, and your sniffles fade without requiring burial clothes. You are 9 years old. That is statistically speaking impressive. You're 14 years old now. You've never seen a mirror large enough to reflect your entire face, but you can feel your body changing. Your limbs are longer. Your voice has shifted, cracked like frost on a roof tile. If you're a girl, your belly has begun to curve. Your chores have multiplied, and your mother watches you with a new blend of pride and quiet urgency. If you're a boy, your father has stopped correcting your posture because in his eyes, you should already stand like a man. There's no such thing as teenager here. That concept won't exist for centuries. At 14, you are a child no longer. You are useful, and you are ready to marry. You've probably known who you'd marry since last winter or longer. Marriage isn't about love. It's about land labor and loyalty. Your parents have been whispering with another family at the market, or nodding across the chapel yard, sealing silent contracts between baskets of turnips. If you're a girl, you've started helping your mother prepare for the marriage spinning, more thread mending, a future husband's shirt before you've even met him properly, and learning the fine art of making a fire from wet sticks. Your wedding dress will be your best tunic with extra stitches and maybe a borrowed sash from a cousin who married the previous summer. If you're a boy, you've begun waking earlier. Your father takes you to the Lord's fields and lets you guide the plow, though your hands blister quickly and your legs ache for days. You'll need your own plot someday, he says. That someday might be next week. The wedding itself is not elaborate. It's held outside the chapel after Sunday Mass, and the priest mumbles his way through the rites while the village stares, not because they're excited, but because nothing else is happening. A feast follows if the harvest was decent. That means bread ale, maybe cheese. A small roast if your in-laws are trying to impress. Your bed that night is the same as every night, scratchy wool over straw, shared with a sibling if space demands it. Privacy is rare. So is affection. But you might get a nod from your new spouse across the hearth the next morning. That counts for something. By 14, you've also likely buried at least one sibling, maybe more. Child mortality is high. If your little brother developed a fever last spring, he probably didn't survive until summer. You watched your mother light a candle and wipe her hands on her apron for 3 full minutes afterward, as if trying to scrub sorrow away. You know how to dig a shallow grave. You know how to keep livestock from trampling it. You've seen grief, and you've seen life renewed each season with aching regularity. If you're lucky, you may already be a parent by 15. It's not considered early, it's considered necessary. You need strong sons to help in the field, and daughters who will eventually sow and barter and bear their own. Every child is both a burden and an investment, an extra mouth to feed, but also another set of hands. At 14, your daily tasks double. You milk goats. You pluck chickens. You knead dough before sunrise and scatter grain for the pigs before your eyes are fully open. You no longer complain. You barely remember how. By now, your back has known pain. You've tasted salted meat and unsalted disappointment. You've walked barefoot across frozen ground and trudged through manure high enough to drown a duckling. But you have also danced once at May Day and laughed so hard once during cider season that you fell into a barrel. You pray more now. Not out of piety necessarily, but out of rhythm. The Angelus bell tolls and your hands fold automatically. You don't know all the Latin, but you know the shape of devotion. At 14, you are more adult than many modern 30-year-olds. You're wed possibly with child and fully expected to survive plague famine, childbirth, and taxation. All before you've grown facial hair worth naming. You don't dream of riches. You dream of a dry winter, a good barley yield, a neighbor who doesn't steal your chicken. Maybe boots if the Lord's wife is feeling generous. You are 14. You are married. And if nothing goes terribly wrong, which in your world is wildly optimistic, you might even make it to 35. The wedding day arrives not with a flourish, but with fog and frost. It's late autumn, and the chill clings to everything, your cloak, your hair, the pit in your stomach. You were told to wake early, though you barely slept. Your body too wired with nerves and the heavy awareness that this day changes everything. You have one decent tunic. It isn't new, it once belonged to a cousin, but it's been cleaned, re-dyed, with crushed berries and patched where the elbows had worn thin. It doesn't fit perfectly, but nothing in your life ever has. A borrowed belt holds it together. If you're lucky, someone lent you shoes for the walk to the chapel. The entire village will attend. Not because they know you well, though most do, but because weddings offer the rare promise of music drink and stories that don't involve taxes or boils. Your father mutters instructions while adjusting your collar. Your mother eyes the sky and worries about wind. If you're a bride, older women encircle you like hens poking at your hair, adjusting your wreath of dried flowers, reminding you repeatedly that smiling is optional, but obedience is eternal. The ceremony itself is brief. You stand before the priest on a patch of trodden earth, ringless hands clasped, while he drones in Latin. You don't catch most of the words. Amen, though you know that one. You say it loudly, so there's no doubt you meant it. You're married now. No one cheers. There's polite clapping, perhaps, or a cough. The church bell tolls once. The priest walks away. The feast begins. Now, feast may sound grand. You imagine tables piled with roast fowl, candied fruits, jugs of honeyed wine. In truth, there's a single long table made of barrels and a plank. Seating is an informal arrangement of tree stumps and worn stools. The food: barley bread, turnip stew, leeks and vinegar, maybe a bit of cheese hoarded for this day, and protected from rats with near religious vigilance. There's ale, of course, weak brown and warm, but more than you'd get on an ordinary day. If your family saved, well, there might be a goose slaughtered the day before and roasted over a shared hearth until the smell made every neighbor jealous. You'll get a slice, maybe two. It'll be the most meat you eat all season. For dessert, there's honey cakes made by your aunt. Dense, chewy, slightly burnt, and exquisite. They taste of effort and affection. No one expects delicacies. Sweetness is measured by the grain of sugar you can afford, not the volume. The village musicians play the same two men who normally argue over chickens. One has a bone flute, the other beats a drum fashioned from a hollowed log and goat hide. They play off-key, always a little behind the dancers, but no one minds. You dance because it is tradition, because your uncle demands it, and because for once, your aching feet don't matter. Children run underfoot, sneaking crusts and giggling. The old men mumble about the weather. A neighbor slurs his congratulations and offers you a wooden cup of something sharp and mysterious. You drink it anyway. If you're the bride, your new mother-in-law eyes you critically between bites of turnip. If you're the groom, your father keeps telling you that marriage is like plowing with a stubborn ox. Difficult, inevitable, and best done early in the morning. The air is thick with smoke spice and the smell of humans crammed together. The hut is too small for this many people, but it doesn't matter. For a few hours, everyone forgets the aching backs, the damp beds, the looming tithe to the manor lord. They drink and laugh. They sing old songs about saints and harvests. Some cry, though they claim it's just the onions. At the end of it all, you're led away. Not to a chamber of privacy and candlelight, but to the same straw bed you've always slept on. If you're lucky, someone added an extra blanket. There's no grand consummation, no violins, just the rustle of blankets, the snore of a cousin nearby, and the knowledge that in the morning you'll be expected to carry water, bake bread, and begin the rest of your life. And so ends your first wedding feast, not with fireworks, but with crumbs on your tunic and a heart that hopes quietly that your new spouse doesn't snore too loudly. Morning comes early in your new life. The sun hasn't yet risen, but the rooster has. You stir from a restless sleep beside your new spouse. Your straw mattress itches. Your back aches. Your head rings faintly from too much ale, or too little sleep, or both. You are now a household, a unit, but that doesn't mean much in terms of space. Your home is a single room. The word hut is generous. It's a structure of timber and mud daubed with straw and manure for insulation. The roof is thatch patched in places with old cloaks and bits of bark. In heavy rain, it leaks in 5 different places. You know them all. There are no rooms, just corners. One for the hearth, one for sleeping, one for storing root vegetables, and one for chickens who keep sneaking in no matter how often you chase them out. Privacy. A laughable concept. The thin cloth hanging beside your bed doesn't muffle sounds. and your brother-in-law sleeps just 5 feet away. Your possessions are few: a wooden bowl, a pewter spoon, 2 tunics between the both of you, and a single iron pot. Your most valuable item after the goat. That goat lives with you too, especially during winter. It's warmer that way though, smellier. Married life is not leisurely. There is no honeymoon, no idle mornings spent in conversation or affection. You are both working before the mist has lifted from the fields. You knead dough while your spouse gathers kindling. You milk the goat while they fetch water. You pluck feathers from a hen that died in the night. You don't mourn it, you stew it. Your first disagreements are quiet. Not because you don't feel them, but because there is no space to shout. You might exchange curt words while chopping onions, or mutter resentments while repairing a fence. Mostly, you simply move around each other like weathered trees rooted swaying, trying not to snap. If you are a wife, your days are spent in a tight loop of bread making, mending brewing, tending the garden, and chasing children. If you're a husband, your hands are cracked from the plow, your shoulders sore from hauling firewood. Roles are clear and rarely crossed. But labor is labor. If someone's sick, you both take over. If something breaks, you both curse. In the evening, you eat by firelight. Pottage again. Always pottage. A grayish stew of barley onions, whatever herbs you could find, and possibly yesterday's crusts. You chew slowly. Talk is minimal. The fire crackles, the goat snorts, and someone outside is always coughing. Nights are cold. You sleep close for warmth, more than comfort. Sometimes there is tenderness, a hand on a back, a whispered story, a brief kiss before dreams arrive. Other times, you are simply two warm bodies beneath a patchy wool blanket, breathing in sync, exhausted and silent. The seasons turn. Winter means desperation. The walls sweat and freeze in the same day. Your breath clouds the air inside your hut. Everyone stays indoors, including the animals. Tempers flare. Sickness spreads. You run out of onions. You chew bitter roots. You pray a lot. Spring brings hope and mud. You're pregnant now, or your spouse is. There's no doctor, just the midwife who smells of nettle and old smoke. You're terrified, but you say nothing. Instead, you keep spinning thread. Keep sowing seeds. Keep patching boots with twine. What else can you do? Some nights, when the fire burns low and the hut is momentarily quiet, you imagine a better hut. One with a second room. One where you can sit without hunching. One where no wind sneaks through the walls. But then the baby cries, or the pot boils over, or the neighbor's cow kicks down your fence, and your thoughts return to earth like everything else in your life. Still, there are small joys. A dry pair of socks. A joke shared over cabbage soup. A late summer afternoon when your spouse hands you a wild apple they found on the path. You split it. The taste is sharp and sweet and rare. This is married life in a hut. Hard, cramped, repetitive, but not without its moments of stubborn, flickering grace. You are not rich. You are not comfortable, but you are together. And for now, that is enough. You do not own a closet. You do not know the word wardrobe. Your clothing is not seasonal stylish or scented with lavender. It is functional. It is patched. It is often damp. Most peasants have two outfits, if that. One for working, one for Sundays and saints' days, which is really just the same outfit, with fewer stains and more careful lacing. Your tunic is made of wool, heavy in winter, itchy in summer. It is dyed with onion skins, mud, or elderberries, giving you a palette of earth tones, whether you like it or not. If you're a woman, you wear a long linen shift beneath your dress, though it's rarely white after a week in the fields. Your apron bears witness to every meal you've stirred, every child you've lifted, every fire you've stoked. If you're a man, your hose reach your thighs, but rarely fit. Breeches are tied at the waist with a bit of cord, often borrowed from the firewood bundle. Shoes are a luxury. You may have one pair made of leather, so stiff it could double as a shield. Most of the year, you go barefoot, mud squelching between your toes, calluses thickening into a second skin. In winter, you wrap your feet in scraps of cloth or straw and hope frostbite favors someone else. As for hygiene, well, it's complicated. You bathe when you can. That is when the stream isn't frozen and you've finished everything else, and only if your neighbors haven't claimed the good spot near the bend. Soap is rare, and when it exists, it's made of ashes and lard. It smells like last month's stew. Hair washing happens infrequently. Head coverings help with lice sometimes. You scratch often. It becomes habitual, like breathing. Fleas and bed bugs are common companions. Everyone has them. You try not to think about it. Your teeth are yellow. You've never owned a comb, but you've used a twig to pick seeds from your molars. Your nails are black with earth. And yet, you do make an effort rubbing rosemary on your wrists before mass scrubbing with coarse sand if guests are expected, rinsing your hair in vinegar if you're feeling extravagant. You do not smell pleasant by modern standards, but you smell like your world, like smoke, sweat, bread, and beasts. And to those around you, that is not offensive. It is simply life. So you walk through your days in layers of wool and grime, carrying the scent of your labor, the marks of your station, and the quiet pride of someone who still rises each morning, dresses in the same worn tunic, and steps once again into the mud. Your diet is humble, repetitive, and brown. If food were a song, yours would be played in one key with two instruments and no chorus. You eat to survive, not to delight. Breakfast is simple and sparse. A crust of yesterday's bread, if there's any left, or a wooden bowl of pottage, if some was left simmering overnight. Pottage is your lifeblood. It is not a single recipe, but a bubbling stew of grains, legumes, water, and whatever scraps or herbs you've scrounged. Some mornings, it contains cabbage. Other days, it's mostly onion. Often, it's just a suggestion of vegetables in gray broth. Bread is your staple, made from barley rye or oats, never white wheat, which is reserved for nobles and clerics. It is dense, chewy, and dark. You chew each bite slowly, not for pleasure, but because the crust is hard enough to wear down molars. If you're lucky, it's baked in a communal oven once a week, and you get a fresh loaf before mold or mice claim it. Meat is rare. If you eat it, it's likely because something died unexpectedly. A chicken caught cold, or a pig that wandered into the wrong ditch. You boil it bone and all, stretching every scrap into soup. Salted pork. If you're fortunate enough to cure some, is saved for special occasions, feasts, births, funerals, or weddings with generous dowries. Dairy is more common. Goat's milk, if your goat is healthy. Cheese, when there's enough milk to spare and time to let it curdle. Butter is a luxury. You use it sparingly, perhaps only on feast days, or if a passing monk is coming to supper. You drink ale. Weak brown, cloudy ale. Everyone drinks it, even children. Water is risky. Wells are shallow. Streams double as laundries and latrines. Ale mildly alcoholic and boiled in the brewing process is safer. You may brew your own flavored with nettle or yarrow, or trade for it using eggs or cloth. On special days, Sundays, holy days, the day your child takes their first step, you may sweeten your life with a treat. A baked apple honey on bread, or porridge with a pinch of cinnamon saved from the last time a trader passed through. But even indulgence is modest. Hunger is your constant companion. There are lean seasons, especially in the weeks before harvest, known grimly as the hungry gap. During this time, your meals shrink. You dig for wild roots. You boil leaves. You pray. The church offers alms when it can, but you've gone to bed with a hollow belly more than once. Still, you survive. You chew slowly. You eat gratefully. You scrape the bowl clean and lick your fingers after. Because waste is not an option. Because hunger is always just one bad rain away. You eat like a serf, simply seasonally, and always with one eye on the next meal. You do not own your land. That is the first and most important truth of your laboring life. The field you plow, the hut you sleep in, even the path you walk each day to reach the well, all of it belongs to the Lord. You are a tenant, a villain, a serf. Your tenancy is not a lease in the modern sense. It's a feudal obligation. In return for living on the Lord's estate, you owe him labor, usually 3 days a week, but more during planting and harvest. There are no holidays from toil, only holy days when you work a little less. Your tools are basic. A wooden plow, tipped with iron if you're fortunate. A sickle, passed down from your grandfather. A spade, a hoe, a rake, all handmade, all maintained with care. If one breaks you, repair it yourself, or trade a few eggs with the smith for help. You begin work at first light. In summer, that means hours before breakfast. In winter, it means stumbling through frozen fields before your breath has warmed your nose. You dig sow weed and reap. You scatter seed by hand, pull stones from furrows, and turn soil that resists you like a stubborn mule. You work in all weather, sun, sleet, rain, or snow. The field doesn't wait. If your back aches, you ignore it. If your foot blisters, you wrap it in linen and keep walking. There are no sick days, only the sick working slower. On the days you don't owe labor to the Lord, you tend your own strip of land, usually a narrow plot in the open field system shared with your neighbors. Your vegetables grow here: onions, leeks, beans, maybe a patch of flax. You harvest what you can and trade what you can't eat. Your rent isn't just in labor, Each year you owe your Lord a portion of your grain, a chicken or two, and perhaps some eggs. You may also be required to give boon, work extra labor during urgent tasks like the harvest. Refusal isn't an option. Penalties include fines or worse banishment from the land, which is as good as a death sentence. Despite this, you don't hate the work itself. It's honest. It connects you to the land, to the seasons, to the rhythm of life that's older than language. You know when the birds return, when the frost lifts, when the barley needs turning. You can smell the rain before it comes. You share your toil with others. Men, women, and children all labor together. You laugh in the fields when someone drops a turnip. You sing while threshing wheat. You curse at the sky together when the hail falls at the wrong time. Your life is toil, but it's also structure, duty, survival. The Lord may own the land, but the blisters, the sweat, the scars on your palms, those are entirely your own. Your life is stitched together by toil, but softened by holy days. These are not days of leisure exactly, but they offer a pause, a breath, a reminder that even the poorest peasant has a soul worth saving. The church calendar rules your world more than the sun and moon. There are over 50 holy days each year, ranging from grand feasts to modest saints' days. You know them all, not because you read a calendar, but because the parish bell rings differently, and your mother starts baking the good bread. On these days, the fields wait, the tools rest. You rise with the dawn, not to dig, but to prepare for Mass. You wear your cleanest tunic. You rinse your face. If you're lucky, you scrub your hands in cold water scented with rosemary. The church is the one stone building in your village, cool in summer and freezing in winter. Its walls are plain, but inside there are candles, faded paintings of saints, and the heavy scent of incense and wax. You kneel, you stand, you listen. The priest speaks in Latin, but the rhythm is comforting. It reminds you there is order beyond the mud. After Mass, there is sometimes food, communal, simple, celebratory. A meat pie shared between families. Ale brewed especially for the occasion. Honey cakes if the bees were generous that year. You do not have time to study theology, but you know the saints like family. Saint Isidore for the harvest, Saint Bridget for mothers, Saint Roche for plague, Saint Barbara for thunderstorms. Each has a story, each has a prayer. When your child coughs, you murmur to Saint Blaise. When the roof leaks, you whisper to Saint Nicholas, not for gifts, but for mercy. You believe deeply, not always in doctrine, but in rhythm, in ritual, in hope. You make the sign of the cross before meals. You keep a small wooden cross above your bed. You leave a candle burning on All Souls' Night, so the spirits won't lose their way. Confession happens a few times a year. You kneel. You speak your sins. You took an egg you didn't own. You skipped a day of work. You said something cruel when tired. The priest absolves you, and for a moment you feel lighter, cleaner than soap could ever make you. Sometimes, on feast days, there is music and dancing, not grand, not courtly, just fiddles and stamping feet. You dance not because you are carefree, but because joy insists on being let out even in the poorest bodies. Hope lives in these holy days. Hope for a better harvest. Hope for rain at the right time. Hope that your child's fever breaks. Hope that you make it through another winter. You pray because you must. You hope because there's nothing else more human to do. And on holy days in your rough clothes and patched boots, you stand a little taller. Because for one day, even a peasant can taste a little piece of heaven. You do not trust your body. It fails without warning, shivering, sweating, aching, wheezing. And when it does, there is no doctor to summon. There is only what the village has knowledge passed through generations, half-remembered chants, dried herbs, and the occasional monk who once read half a book on anatomy. Illness is not understood in modern terms. You've never heard of bacteria. You don't know what a virus is. Sickness comes from imbalance. Too much heat, too much cold, a misaligned humor. Or it comes from sin, or a curse, or the devil's breath carried by wind from a far-off shore. When someone in your household falls ill, you don't ask, "What is it?" You ask, "Who can help?" There's the herb woman Agnes. She speaks softly, grows strange plants near the edge of the woods, and carries a pouch of garlic wherever she goes. For coughs, she boils wild thyme. For fevers, a poultice of mustard seed and vinegar. For nightmares, she smokes mugwort under your bed. Then there's Brother Thomas, the beekeeper monk, who once stitched a knight's wound after a hunting accident. He'll place his palm on your brow, whisper a psalm, and tell you to drink boiled nettles and pray to Saint Sebastian. More serious cases might call for bleeding done with a knife, a sharp stone, or if you're truly lucky, a leech. The belief is simple: if you're ill, your blood is bad. Letting it out by the spoonful might just save you. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it doesn't. Toothache. There's no cure, but there are options. Rub sage on your gums, chew on cloves, or if desperate, have the blacksmith yank the offending tooth with iron tongs. It hurts. A lot. You scream. But it's over. And now, there's one less reason to cry in the night. Broken bones are set with wood splints, tied with linen. If the break is clean, you heal crooked. If it's not, you limp for life. You don't complain. At least you still walk. Women face special risks. Childbirth is common, but dangerous. Midwives are skilled, but even they lose mothers and babies far too often. Prayers are whispered, candles lit, and when a birth is successful, it's called a miracle, not a procedure. Most treatments are guided by trial tradition and sheer hope. You might wear a charm made of jet to ward off plague, drink ground pearls and milk for stomach aches, or sleep with your feet pointing east to restore balance. And if nothing helps, if your skin darkens, your breath shortens, your limbs stiffen, you are prepared. You confess. You receive a blessing, and you wait. Medicine in your world is not a science. It is an art of desperation. But in its own way, it works sometimes. And in the moments it doesn't, you hold a loved one's hand. Recite the names of saints and look to the heavens for healing. Because here in your world, faith is often the strongest medicine of all. It begins quietly, as hardship often does not, with a storm, but with a chill that lingers past its welcome. Frost that should have lifted in March still crusts the thatch in May. The seedlings hesitate. The barley sulks beneath the soil. You wait, you hope. By summer, the hope fades. The sun is weak, and the rains come too often. The vegetables rot in the ground. The oats sprout late and stunted. The apple tree bears only a few hard green lumps. It'll be better next year, someone mutters. But next year is a world away. You have to survive this one first. Your meals grow smaller. The pottage thins. You add more water, more nettles, more wild greens, bitter ones you once fed to pigs. Meat is out of the question. The chickens stopped laying in July. The goat bleats mournfully with nothing left to graze. The root cellar echoes with emptiness. Autumn brings little relief. The harvest is meager, barely enough to fill a few sacks. What grain you do have must be ground carefully, rationed, protected. You hide a few handfuls in a cloth pouch beneath the hearthstone in case your neighbor grows desperate and forgets his manners. Then comes winter. The frost returns with vengeance, coating everything in white silence. The well freezes, the firewood dwindles. You sleep in your clothes, wrapped in layers, curled beside the dog, the goat, the baby. Anything that gives warmth. Hunger becomes constant. You chew bark. You boil bones for the third time, hoping for flavor. One night, you catch a rat, skin it, and cook it with dried thyme. No one speaks during that meal. Chewing feels like penance. One morning, your cousin is caught stealing a turnip from the manor's storehouse. He is beaten, shamed, and sent home with a broken finger. You all pretend he tripped. Disease arrives soon after. Coughs echo through the huts. Bellies swell from malnutrition. The priest blesses 5 graves in 1 week. Your neighbor's baby dies wrapped in linen, buried in ground too hard to dig deep. The bell tolls. Again, you pray, harder than before. St. Cuthbert for cold. St. Joseph for sustenance. Your mother lights a candle every night, though you know she has only 2 left. And then somehow, the frost begins to retreat. The days grow longer. The ice melts. One morning, a patch of green appears where the snow has finally released its grip. The goat finds it first. You follow. You are thinner. Your hands tremble when you hold a bowl. Your eyes dart toward every sound. But you survived. The year of the great frost has left its mark. On your body, on your neighbors, on the land, but also on your soul, toughened, tempered, and wary. Spring returns as it always does. You dig again. You plant. You hope. Because you must. It doesn't arrive with warning. It arrives with whispers. You first hear of it from a traveler passing through on foot, a tattered man with wild eyes who mutters of sickness in the south. He says entire villages lie silent. He says the dead outnumber the living. You laugh nervously and cross yourself when he turns away. Then you hear it again from the baker's cousin who trades in the next town. Boils, he says, black as coal. They burst. People die in a day. He speaks quickly, barely above a whisper, and leaves with more flour than usual. By the time the priest says it aloud, from the pulpit face, pale beneath his robes, it is too late. You know it has come. It begins with a cough. Not unusual. People cough all the time. But this one lingers. Then comes the swelling under the arms, at the groin, hard lumps that burn and pulse and turn dark. The afflicted shiver, vomit, bleed from their mouths and noses. Sometimes they scream. Sometimes they simply fall still. No one understands it. Some say it's punishment for sin. Others claim it comes in the breath of foreign merchants or in the fur of rats. You hear that cats are being killed to cleanse the village, but the rats only grow bolder. The air feels different, still heavy. The silence of death hangs like smoke over the fields. No birds sing, no children laugh. The world is waiting for something to break. The sick are quarantined, though no one uses the word. They are left in their huts with a candle and a prayer. Food is dropped at the door if there is food to spare. Most die alone, some abandoned. You dig more graves than you thought possible. Shallow ones at first, then mass pits dug quickly and covered even faster. There is no time for proper rites. The priest blesses entire carts of corpses with a single frantic prayer. Fear consumes the village. Families turn inward. Doors are bolted. People stop helping one another. The communal oven goes cold. You speak through cracks in the wall, not face to face. Eye contact feels dangerous. But even in this darkness, strange customs arise. Bread is buried beneath doorsteps to trap the sickness. Bundles of rosemary are hung in windows to sweeten the air. Children are told to sing songs when fetching water to let others know they still live. You lose your uncle, then your sister, then your neighbor who once danced with you on May Day. You forget what their voices sounded like. You try not to think of your own cough, creeping into your chest like a secret. Then one day, it stops. Not completely, but it slows. The dead are fewer. The silence begins to lift. The birds return. You emerge blinking from the edge of disaster. Thinner, quieter, forever changed. The plague has left, but it leaves behind holes. In your village, in your family, in your mind, still you rise, because the earth waits. The goats need feeding, the barley needs planting. And because somehow you are still alive, you've grown older, though it's hard to tell exactly how many years have passed. There are no birthdays to mark, no parchment records in the hut, but your hands know. Your knees ache in the mornings, your grip isn't what it once was, and your hair, what remains of it, has turned the color of ash. Life has narrowed. You no longer till the Lord's fields. Your eldest son does that now. You tend the garden slowly, leaning on a stick. You still mend tunics and slice onions, but with fewer teeth and more size. You've outlived many your siblings, some of your children, nearly all your childhood friends. You've seen feasts, famines, weddings, and funerals. You've buried too many. Now when you close your eyes at night, you whisper prayers, not only for protection, but for peace, just in case you don't wake. Then one cold morning, something shifts inside you. A tightness in the chest, a burning behind the ribs. You hide it at first. Pain is not new. You've ignored worse. But after a few days, you can no longer rise from bed. Your breath comes shallow. Your limbs feel heavy, as if the very earth is beginning to call you back. Your family gathers, quietly. Your spouse kneels beside the bed. Your grown children whisper to one another. A candle is lit and placed near your head. You can smell the wax and rosemary. The village priest arrives in the afternoon. He blesses you, murmuring Latin through cracked lips. You confess in fragments, sins small and large, remembered or half imagined. You are not afraid. Not anymore. The fear left with youth. What remains is weariness and maybe a bit of wonder. What lies beyond the thatched roof, the trees, the sky? Your last moments are simple. No drama, no final words worth writing down. Just a long exhale, followed by stillness. Someone closes your eyes and covers your body with a linen shroud. The candle flickers once, then steadies. The church bell tolls. The funeral is modest. There are no carriages, no marble markers, no stone crypts. You are laid in a simple wooden box, if wood is available, or wrapped in cloth and carried on a plank by your sons. The procession is short from hut to chapel, from chapel to earth. The priest speaks of humility, of labor, of faith. He says your name, your patron saint, your years of service. He sprinkles holy water. A hymn is sung badly but sincerely. You are lowered into the soil dirt that once stained your hands, fed your crops, warmed your feet in summer. The grave is filled. A wooden cross is placed at the head, carved with your initials, if someone had the strength. The mourners leave slowly. Life must continue. There is bread to bake children, to chase fences to mend. The earth, as always, turns. You are gone. But the village endures. And so your story passes into memory, folded gently into the soil where it began. Your name is spoken for a few weeks after your burial. It lingers in murmured stories, at the well, in quiet blessings offered at the evening hearth. She made the best oat bread. He once wrestled a pig from a priest's cart, but soon those memories soften fray and are folded into the broader fabric of village life. No monument marks your grave, only a wooden cross that will lean rot and eventually vanish. The children will play near it, never quite remembering who lies beneath. And yet you leave something behind. The field you once tilled still grows barley now worked by your son. The hut you patched with moss and stubborn nails still shelters those you raised. Your old cloak, too worn for work, becomes a rag to wipe soot from a cooking pot. Even your bones nestled in the soil nourish the roots of the wildflowers that bloom each spring. You do not have a legacy of titles or writings or gold, but your legacy is real. It's in the laughter of your grandchildren chasing chickens through the yard. It's in the recipes whispered from mother to daughter, how to make stew from nearly nothing. It's in the way your family kneels at Mass, where you always did, shoulder to shoulder, hands, folded in the same rhythm. The world doesn't remember you by name. Historians won't write books about your life. Your story won't appear in illuminated manuscripts beside kings and saints. But you mattered. You were one of the millions who turned the wheel of time with calloused hands and tired feet. Your life was short, difficult, and mostly invisible to the wider world, but it held all the richness of being human joy, sorrow, love, loss, hunger, laughter, and grace. You lived half of what we now call a lifespan, but you lived fully in the time you were given. Each stitch you sewed, each fence you mended, each prayer you whispered into the thatch was a thread in the great tattered tapestry of history. Without people like you, quiet, enduring unseen, there would be no castles, no cathedrals, no kingdoms, only silence. Your story may not end with glory, but it ends with dignity. You endured. You gave, you raised, you hoped. And though the wind has long since swept away your footprints, and the years have claimed the wooden walls of your home, your life ripples forward in the lives that followed. So perhaps yours was not a life half lived. Perhaps it was simply enough.